Imagine a winter's tale where frozen thoughts hang in the air, revealing every secret at the North Pole. In this philosophical fable, a walrus story unfolds, exploring honesty versus deception as he journeys to the tropics where thoughts vanish into secrecy. This whimsical tale, rich in Arctic folklore and animal allegory, is a classic fable about truth, solitude, and the clash between cold versus heat, like fire and ice. A winter's tale. Once upon a time, 1,000,000 years ago, in the old world, when thoughts froze in the air. You should know that 1,000,000 years ago, the North Pole was much colder than it is now. Just like that, the temperature could fall to 1,000,000,000 degrees below zero. With cold like that, everything would freeze, even your thoughts, believe it or not. For example, you had only to think, "Gosh, it's cold," and suddenly a little cloud would form and hang over your head. Inside there would be sharp, icy letters shaped like stalactites that read, "Gosh, it's cold." The fact that your frozen thoughts were visible logically ended up meaning that no one at the North Pole was brave enough to think anything at all. I mean, no one, not bears, not penguins, not seals, not dogs, not Inuit. No one thought anything at all. In short, it was like a world of mannequins. They appeared to be incapable of thinking, but they were kind and had gentle spirits. During one of those centuries, and in those days of the old world, a century took place in a day. During one of those centuries, a certain walrus was lying perfectly still on an ice floe, enjoying the cold. With eyes half closed, without a thought in his brain other than the word "ba," which was spelled out in ice above his head. What he might have wished to express by this "ba" was impossible to know. Suddenly an eel, all spiritual and wavy, called out to Walrus. "Hey, Walrus, listen to me!" Walrus replied, "Tell me, an eel. Listen to what happened to me on my last trip," he said. "Imagine this. I was in a country called Tropics, where it is hot, really hot. And guess what? In Tropics, thoughts don't freeze." "Don't tell me," said Walrus. "Really? For example, someone looks at you and thinks, 'What a huge bottom Walrus has,' and you would not even know because down there in that terrible heat, thoughts don't freeze and so they are invisible." "Who says I have a huge bottom?" grumbled Walrus, taking offense. "I just said it to give you an example. Listen, why don't we leave this North Pole where you can't think anything without everyone knowing your thoughts immediately? Why don't we go to Tropics? If you only knew how delightful it is to be able to think without worrying, in perfect freedom. In Tropics, I gorged myself on thoughts. And what did you think? Oh, so many things. Like, I don't know, things like the sun is green, or 2 + 2 = 5. But the sun isn't green, and 2 + 2 = 4. Yes, I know, exactly. But that's what was so wonderful. To be able to think whatever you like without anyone knowing. In short, an eel went on at such great length that Walrus let himself be convinced to go with him to the country called Tropics. He might not have agreed if at that exact moment a ship had not pulled up alongside the ice floe and 3 men dressed in furs and carrying clubs disembarked. Now, at the North Pole, everyone always kept his eye on the sky to see what frozen thoughts were hanging up there. Walrus, who was looking above the heads of the 3 men carrying clubs, was horrified to see, "Now we can kill 100 or so these stupid beasts. We'll just bonk them on the nose and then we can make lots of bags and shoes out of them." To see these quivering words dripping in the air and to slither off the ice floe were one and the same for Walrus. An eel set off with Walrus swimming, or rather flippering, right behind. Swim, 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 and as they swam, the temperature went from 1,000,000,000 degrees below zero to 1,000,000,000 degrees above zero. Mamma mia, it was hot. The sea was boiling just like the water in a pot, except in this case the fire wasn't under the pot, it was up above. The walrus hadn't yet had even one thought. After 1,000,000 years without thinking, his head was still paralyzed. But as he swam, he asked an eel, "Dear an eel, are you thinking anything? And how?" "And what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking a lot of things about you," such as, "I'm not going to tell you. I might make you feel bad." Walrus got upset. At the North Pole, as I have said, no one thought anything about anyone. Here, on the other hand, an eel was taking advantage of the fact that his thoughts were invisible to Walrus, thinking mean things about him. Gossipy, silly, hypocritical creature. All of a sudden, Walrus began to think very bad things about an eel, and he was sure that in turn, an eel was thinking very bad things about him. In fact, this was a common phenomenon for creatures from the North Pole who ended up in Tropics. Everyone there paid Walrus marvelous compliments. "Welcome. You are so beautiful. What an intelligent face. What expressive eyes. What a lovely mustache," etc., etc. But Walrus was sure, super sure, that if this was happening at the North Pole, he would be able to read in the air, in letters of ice, "Now, who could ever want him around? And he's so ugly. What an ugly mug. What piggy eyes. What a crumbling mustache," etc., etc. This conviction that everyone thought the exact opposite of what they said poisoned Walrus to stay in that place. One day, when the temperature reached 1.5 billion degrees under the sun, a certain person called African was floating around in the middle of the Gulf of Guinea in a boat with his wife and children. He was singing a little song to an eel who stared at him with enraptured attention. "Oh eel, fat yet skinny, your strange appeal is quite the deal. Oh eel, and you are no ninny." An eel was so attracted by these kind words that, clearly forgetting that in tropics you say one thing while meaning the opposite, he swam close to the boat. African quickly threw his net over him, and in the time it takes me to tell you this, had cut up, breaded, fried, and eaten poor an eel. Walrus watched this massacre in horror. He swam off thinking, "How terrible." This redeems the reputation of those of us at the North Pole who never think anything, and if we do think something, everyone can see what it is. Still, in part because of the novelty of the place and its customs, and part because of laziness, he didn't return to the North Pole right away. After all, why not admit it? The possibility of thinking without anyone being able to read your thoughts, and most of all being able to think the opposite of what to say and do, fascinated him. Thus Walrus stayed in Tropics and adopted the habits of the place. Of course, it wasn't as loyal and transparent a place as the North Pole, but being able to think for yourself without outside controls led to unexpected developments. For example, believe it or not, Walrus began to think very elevated, even philosophical thoughts, such as, who are we? Where do we come from? What is our destiny? Why are we here? Where are we going? They were, in short, the questions that, if one asked them of oneself, could lead to the idea we don't live to eat, we eat to live. The answers to them were, we are all walruses. We come from the North Pole. Our destiny is to eat fish. We are here because there is a supreme being in the shape of a giant walrus. And in the end, we will leave the country of Tropics because it is false and lying, and will return to the country of loyalty, which is the North Pole. And this was, in fact, the conclusion of Walrus's voyage to Tropics. One fine day, fed up with thinking one thing and saying another, Walrus departed for the North Pole. If, he thought, this means no more thinking, how restful to be there unmoving, empty without thinking for at least 1 million years. Alas, this was an illusion. Once back at the North Pole, sitting on his ice floe once more, Walrus realized that he had picked up the vice, and no matter how much he tried, he couldn't help thinking. Naturally, all his thoughts immediately appeared over his head, written in sparkling, translucent words of ice. Bears, penguins, seals, fish, and little fish could see his frozen thoughts and raced each other to get as far away from him as possible. This, because at the North Pole thinking was considered to be a serious transgression, as walking down the street naked is today. Poor Walrus, for his part, seeing his longtime friends avoid and escape him, he couldn't help but think the worst possible things about them. These sudden bad thoughts expressed themselves in little clouds filled with insults and spiteful abusive language, and thus the gap between Walrus and the other creatures of the North Pole grew wider and became impossible to cross. In short, Walrus remained alone on his floe, always alone. From those days to these, the temperature at the North Pole has gone up, so that thoughts don't freeze anymore. They have become invisible. Nonetheless, Walrus has acquired the habit of solitude and doesn't hang out with anyone. Alone on his ice floe, he thinks. What does he think? He thinks nostalgically of the time when no one thought at all, because thoughts were visible. Beautiful, carefree times, though they were very, very cold ones.